I'd like to open up with a question. How many of you here are firstborns? First daughters, first sons? Now, keep your hand up if, at any point in your life, you have had someone call you responsible, or mature for your age, or say, I never had to worry about you. There's this really common stereotype going around, and it's been going around for a while, that firstborn children are born leaders, that they're independent, organized, and dependable. Lately, I've been looking at why we're labeled as such. What if that responsibility isn't as innate as we thought it would be? What if it was learned? Being the firstborn means being the first draft. The ones who hear no all the time from our parents. The ones who learn what mistakes should and should not be made. The ones who get the longest lectures. And the ones whose mistakes get laid as pavement for the future of our siblings. We are the bar that everyone has to meet. Alfred Adler, a founding member and president of the Vienna Psychoanalytic Society, stated something that he called the birth order theory. Firstborn children grow up under very different circumstances than those of their younger siblings. For example, I've often grown up as somebody who's had to make very meticulous decisions in my life because my parents were more attentive when it came to me. They were more rule-focused. Everything about raising the firstborn feels like it's at higher stakes. My parents figured it out as they went. From us, they learned how to raise our younger siblings. We became, simply put, what I like to call the prototype child. You know, stereotypically, this wouldn't be a problem in families that are more individuality-oriented, like those in America. But here, in my case, I come from an immigrant family that hails from India, which means my family is very, very keen on wording the word responsibility a little differently. Responsibility doesn't mean just taking care of yourself or owning up to what you've been dealt. It means shouldering and representing the family image, honing that reputation and maintaining it. Because now, you aren't just your own self. Making a mistake, even if it can't be called a mistake, doesn't just fall as a personal failure. You've effectively, through the choices that you've made, smeared shame on the name of your parents by making their upbringing of you and their decisions in their life useless. Sound like a familiar sentence? The worst part of shouldering the responsibility that comes with being a firstborn is the weight of that responsibility. You learn the rules as they're being written. You have no one to learn from, no example to follow, no older sibling to look up to. I wonder if, when my elders, my seniors, people older than me in the family, when they call me emotionally mature or responsible, they only see what I've been conditioned into. The stiff structure that comes with being a prototype child. The facade that comes with being the firstborn. If that firstborn becomes that first draft, whatever results we show have to be translated into the second draft. They are expected to be written in the future copies. Our task, as representatives of the family, gives us a very important role in it. We become stabilizers. We learn how to manage the family status. We learn how to maintain harmony in the family. We learn how to keep the balance. I think here's a good spot to mention that I have 2 younger brothers. The elder one is 3 years younger than me, which means most of our childhood, we have spent it together, playing, talking with each other, laughing, fighting. When we were younger, my brother would often throw fits about things that I had. We got into conflicts regularly. Toys, games, seats, who would watch the next thing on TV. When our bickering was brought up to our parents, when the situation escalated so badly that my mother or my father had to intervene, I would receive the same response every single time. He's your little brother. You know better. Just let it go. Even now, my mother relies on those exact same words to make sure he doesn't fall into a tantrum. I learned a very important rule in these exchanges. I was expected to maintain emotional balance. If my brother was throwing a fit over a toy that he wanted, I was expected to give it to him. If he stole a snack that I kept for myself, I was expected to get over it. My sacrifices led to the family's balance. Psychologists call this parentification. When a child takes on emotional or relational responsibilities that should fall in the hands of the parents or of the elders in the family, the childlike urge to let ourselves simply feel, get into arguments that sort themselves out, to stand on our own will and argue for ourselves, that urge fades. Our will narrows. Our individuality dissipates. In family-oriented cultures, this urge for atmospheric perfection is prioritized over individuality. And this means that emotional labor is valued. Being low maintenance is considered the highest of virtues. That emotional labor comes encoded in your system. You read the room. You notice the tension before it ever even escalates. And you adapt to the situations that you are put in, regardless of how you feel in them, according to the moods of those that rely on you. The restrictions on childhood weren't visible. They weren't made tangent. They weren't spoken out loud. But they were there, and they were expected of you. The reason it ingrains itself so deeply in your brain, the reason it sits so deeply in your system and stays there for so long, is because it works. Keeping the peace gets approval. Being mature gains trust, reliance. Being emotionally useful ensures safety. Unfortunately, it manifests itself a little differently in adulthood. Research that surveyed parentified firstborns showed long-term effects that trace back to these acclaimed virtues. These adults, now having grown out of their teenage years and living independently in their new families or by themselves, have difficulty asking for help. They experience discomfort with rest, and they face a deep internalized guilt when it comes to choosing themselves. Even when you're exhausted, letting go feels dangerous because you're too afraid of seeing it all fall apart. When you've been raised to hold everything together, even the slightest of mistakes, even stepping away for mere moments, feels like a danger to both you and your entire family. Now, I mentioned culture earlier and how it's shaped so many of what our firstborn children face. The responsibility we are dealt with is shaped by tradition, hierarchy, and expectations that were shaped long before we were even born. these rules, well, I can't necessarily call them rules, but these values, these traditions, these ideals that our families hold so deep to themselves, they aren't just framework. They're what the firstborns carry. You're not living your own life. You are preserving and embodying a tradition. You set the standard and prove that the family's values are still worthy, that they still work, and that they still mean something, thus effectively making you living proof of a long-standing legacy. Cue the internal conflict. Personal dreams clash with your family duty. Mental health is weighed against gratitude. What you want is held against what others want, and your struggle is repainted as selfishness. The struggles that my parents faced growing up are stories, anecdotes, lessons that I know by heart. Whenever I feel like I'm struggling, whenever I open up and try to understand how I feel or how the emotions I bottle up are organizing themselves, I feel terrible because I can't explain, not even to myself, that I'm hurting without sounding incredibly ungrateful to my own ears. And that worsens the pressure on me and to what a lot of firstborns face. It worsens those conditions, that urge to be better. And like I said, this isn't just unique to me. In several studies of adolescents conducted in China in the years 2006, 2009, and 2018, researchers found that firstborns reported more parental expectations and a stronger obligation to their families. Pressures that consistently lead into the struggles they face in adulthood. Pressures that are linked to higher emotional stress and higher burden on their mental health. The weight isn't imagined, and the conflict is not exaggerated. I want to ask another question, a hypothetical one. What happens when being a good child doesn't require being an honest one? When obedience is rewarded more than authenticity, and harmony matters more than truth, you go from adapting to editing yourself. You learn which feelings are acceptable and which ones are better off not mentioning. Your identity itself shifts into something intended to be low maintenance, something intended to be tolerable and praiseworthy. You become pushed off to the side, still there like a strong pillar, but refusing to let yourself accept what you truly feel. Researchers studying achievement-oriental familial systems report how firstborns are more inclined to internalize the concept of something called conditional self-worth. Love isn't necessarily withheld, but it feels amplified when you do well and muted when you don't. It's still there, but it changes. So your success and your achievements feel less like pride and more like protection, armor that you wear to protect yourself from being hurt. Eventually, you will reach a conclusion. Nothing I do will ever be enough. Not because I can't achieve it, no, but because the bar for enough, that guideline, the standard for enough, keeps changing. This turns into what a large demographic of my fellow firstborns face: perfectionism, imposter syndrome, anxiety. There's a very important part of being a firstborn that adds into those being a second or a third parent. Firstborns are often asked to be caretakers, watching your younger siblings, helping with homework, translating for your parents, handling logistics that feel far too big for somebody of their age. You're positioned as a role model, effectively as someone that others should look up to. This is especially strong in immigrant households like mine and places where family is valued over individuality. When your parents are navigating new worlds, new realms, new situations, systems that weren't built for them, you become a bridge between those. Immersing yourself in these new systems leads you to become somebody that your parents can rely on. You carry adult knowledge in a young body because that is a role that you have to provide for them. Sociological research on immigrant families specifically show that the firstborn children in particular are assigned instrumental and emotional responsibilities. They become intermediaries, like I said, bridges between parents and institutions. You're praised for being capable. You are relied on for your stability. And quietly, you are assumed to be able to handle more than what is on your plate. And yet, herein lies the contradiction of that. You're treated like an authority figure, but you are given no true authority. You are given the expectations to lead, but you are given no power to lead. You are given the task to reinforce these ideals, but you are not allowed to create any of these ideals of your own. You are expected to manage situations, but you are not allowed to disagree. You are expected to be responsible, but you are not allowed to fail. And that contradiction, that dilemma within yourself, does something to you. Because when things go wrong, the weight doesn't feel individual. It feels collective. Like I mentioned earlier, your mistakes don't just affect you. They affect your siblings. They sometimes affect your parents. They affect the entire family dynamic in itself. Because you are that pillar, and any mistake you make is like a crack in the foundation. That's why, if you feel like you have control issues as a firstborn child, it's not because you crave power, but because chaos, that disorganization, the mess, feels dangerous. When you've been held accountable for so much throughout your life, without being given control to handle that accountability, the only way to feel safe, the only way to have a sense of security within yourself, is to manage everything yourself. To take everything on your back, to make sure the load is in your hands, to hold up the sky like Atlas himself if it means it won't fall down on your family. You get used to carrying more than you should, for longer than you should, without rest or recognition. And even when you're exhausted, stopping doesn't feel like an option, because people are counting on you. And this is what leads to burnout, an experience that most of you are familiar with in this room, at a very early age. Because beneath all of the turmoil that you face sits fear. Fear that if you let go, everything will collapse. Up until now, we've talked about responsibility as it lands the same way on every firstborn. But it doesn't. Because once a very specific factor, gender, enters the equation, the role remains the same, but the burden changes, depending heavily on whether you're a firstborn son or a firstborn daughter. For firstborn sons, their responsibility, their sense of purpose in the family, is often framed as the legacy they bring. You're expected to carry the family name. You're expected to succeed outwardly. Financial stability, tangent reliability, becomes a moral obligation and not just a goal. There's a pressure amongst many, many sides to be strong, reliable, unshakable. Emotional expression, in particular, which some of you may see others regarding as a weakness, is tolerated less. Success, your success in particular, isn't just personal. It's proof that the family will be okay because it will sit on your shoulders. And if you struggle, the fear isn't just of failure, it's of letting everyone down. For firstborn daughters, like myself, the expectations shift inward. Responsibility becomes caregiving. You're taught to anticipate needs, to regulate emotions, to validate and put others first. Emotional labor becomes invisible, but it becomes constant. Your sacrifice is praised. Your endurance is expected. You're often positioned head first as the helper, the peacemaker, the one who holds the family together, like glue. Your ambitions may be whatever they need to be, whatever they want to be. They may be supported, but only as long as they don't as long as they don't disrupt, as long as they don't interfere with your availability to others. And again, like I mentioned before, no one says this out loud. It's taught through what's expected of you and what isn't, through patterns, through praise, through experience, through things that you pick up. The expectations carry different weights for everyone. And understanding that difference matters because it explains why firstborns can share similar wounds, can share similar burdens, can have nearly the same validation requirements, but they carry them in completely different ways. So you might be wondering, at this point, are you trying to tell us to fix it? Are you expecting us to change it overnight? Not really. I'm not here to talk to you about things like erasing the past or rewriting your childhood from scratch. You can't go back into the past to fix what's already been done. I'm here to make you realize that the role you learned to play was never the whole story. Because prototypes were never meant to be permanent. They exist, they are made so that something better, something truer, and something more flexible and strong can come in next. The expectations you face, the responsibility you're dealt, the script you were handed, it worked. It worked for you. It got you this far. And it helped your family function. You became somebody that your family needed. But survival, going through that, barely scraping by, isn't the same thing as destiny. Breaking the script doesn't mean rejecting your family or resenting your role. It doesn't mean casting away your virtues and your values. It doesn't mean completely cutting yourself off from whatever has shaped your childhood. Sometimes, it just means choosing differently when you're allowed to. It means saying no without guilt. It means resting without permission. Letting responsibility be something you opt into, not something that defines you. And that first step to break that script, to heal yourself, to grow into somebody more permanent, more reliable on yourself, not to others, And the first step to doing that is acknowledging it. Because being the prototype, being the first draft, means you're unfinished. It means you get to revise. And maybe, through all this, that's the quiet hope here. That the prototype child doesn't have to keep proving that they work. They already do. Now we get to decide what's next. We get to rewrite that script. My name is Diya. Pillai. This was my speech, The Prototype Child. Thank you so much for having me here tonight.